Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Miller. Today I'm hopping on to talk about how you can reduce turnover within your organization. Last week, I sent out a poll on LinkedIn asking hiring managers to weigh in on some of the top challenges you tend to experience in your hiring process. Is it one, getting enough candidates, enough of the right candidates and the right candidate resumes? Is it experiencing turnover, or is it managing the interview process? So the top result, 47% said it is the biggest challenge tends to be not getting enough of the right candidates and the right resumes. And so last week I hopped on to talk about some tips, some pointers, things that you can do if you are not getting enough of the right candidate resumes. And 35%, the second biggest challenge I've received feedback on, is experiencing. So today I'm going to talk about ways that you can decrease turnover. And then 18% said managing the interview process overall. So maybe next week I'll hop on and share some pointers for that. All right, so how can you decrease turnover within your organization if you are experiencing bad hires? Before we explore the solution, we're going to dig a little bit deeper. Something I always like to do is because it's very impactful, and that is to look deeper at the problem, the true impact of a bad hire. And why is this impactful in creating change, looking deeper at the problem? Or why is looking deeper at the problem impactful in creating change? Oftentimes, we don't tend to solve our problems until we pay attention to them. And we tend not to pay attention to our problems until they get big enough, until they get uncomfortable enough. But the good news is you actually don't have to wait for your problems, bad hires, for example, to get really, really big and uncomfortable before you start creating change. And then you can make this a habit of paying attention to the problem, what is bothering you, your emotions, the true impact or measure of what's happening. And then you can start creating change faster. So let's dig deeper into the true impact, the true cost of a bad hire. I think we've all likely heard that rough statistic about 30% of the employee's first year's earnings is going to be the cost of a bad hire. So that's not ideal. It's not great. However, it's not that scary. But there are a lot of references and resources out there that claim this number is actually much higher, actually exceeding $1 million for just one bad hire. I did paste or link a couple of the references that I'll talk about now in the chat in case you guys want to explore those later. One of them is this really great book I highly recommend, Hiring Smart by Dr. Pierre Mornell. In his book, so this was published in 1998, and then more recent article with the same numbers I dropped in the chat as well. So in his book, Hiring Smart, he breaks it down to the true cost of a bad hire exceeding $1 million and actually taking about 18 months or up to 18 months to recover. So let's break it down just a little bit. And again, the second article that I dropped in the chat really has a great breakdown of the specific numbers on how we get to the exceeding the number of over $1 million over $1 million for just one bad hire. So you, by the time you recruit, hire, onboard, and train your new hire, you're already at about $100,000. And then you typically have about a 6-month ramp up period. So if your new hire has, for example, a $1 million quota, well, there's a lot of opportunity costs within that territory that may not be being met during that 6-month ramp up period. And then it typically takes about 6 months to learn, okay, you know what? We don't have the right hire. We actually made a bad hire because maybe they didn't ramp up. Maybe there are some challenges within the territory. There could even be some potentially accounts potentially lost. So that's a lot of opportunity costs lost within the territory. And then it can sometimes take up to 6 months to coach that candidate out. And then by that time, you're at about $1 million in losses, not to mention all of the time, energy that you, hiring manager, and the other members of the leadership team have invested in this new hire that didn't end up being the right hire. And also, what about the impact to your team morale? oftentimes when we don't have the right fit on the team, that can cause some challenges for the other members of the team. And then who are they, hiring manager, going to be bringing their frustrations to? You. So that's going to be further distracting your focus away from your leadership duties and you making a greater impact within and across your team. And then you're starting the process over again. So then you've got to get the new get the right hire, hopefully the second time, and then you've got the hiring, the onboarding, the training, and then again that 6-month ramp up period. So starting the process all over again increases the number further. And then that's how you get that 18-month mark. So if you want a more specific breakdown, definitely check out the article that I linked here. So that's a big, scary number. One bad hire potentially costing your organization up to, and maybe sometimes even more than, $1 million. And that's just one bad hire. But then what if you have multiple divisions and you've got multiple bad hires across multiple divisions and or teams throughout the year? And then think about over time, over multiple years. And then think about over multiple years. Making bad hires can potentially be costing your organization a lot of money, making a big dent in profitability. So, but I think that I'm a big believer in that the best lessons are the ones that we teach ourselves. And why would that be? Because it's more personal. Yes, we can read about statistics for this person or that company, but when it really makes a difference is when we look at the problem and our actions and or inaction and the results or lack of that we're producing ourselves and taking that responsibility. So I encourage you. So these numbers are just taken from resources and research, but look within your own organization to really gain an understanding of the true impact of a bad hire and how many bad hires are happening within your organization annually. And then you can see, okay, yes, we're doing okay, or actually we're not doing okay. We really need to take some action here. All right, so that's a big scary number, and we don't often like to look at that, and it's uncomfortable to kind of sit with the discomfort. It's very uncomfortable sometimes to sit with the discomfort, but that's when you can really start to create impactful change from there. So let's do that now with a couple of very simple tips on how you can decrease turnover. And this is the good news. The good news is that you can control the top 2 contributors that research shows leading to bad hires are within your control. So if you are a hiring manager, you have likely given this advice to your sales reps before, which is to control the controllables. And this is a great success habit that a lot of motivational speakers, and I talk about it too, you'll hear talk about often, because the only things that we actually have control over are ourselves and our own decisions. And when we focus on things outside of our control, then we end up distracting ourselves in areas that we can't really make an impact. So you have control over the top 2 contributing factors that lead to bad hires. And what are they? Poor communication and either lack of or a rushed process. So poor communication and a lack of or a rush process. These are the top 2 contributing factors that lead to bad hires. And again, the good news there is that you have control over both. So let's talk about that. Let's talk first about communication. And I like to get very granular and specific when I'm mentioning different terms. Like communication is something that we all know what that means, but what do we really mean when we're talking about improving your communication in the hiring process? A lot of times we'll throw a word out there, but it's kind of fuzzy in our head. So let's really break it down. So when we're talking about improving communication within your hiring process, communication with whom and how? Well, communication with your recruiter, communication with your candidates, and communication with the other members of your leadership team. But let's dial it back even another layer before we get to the communication. One of my favorite quotes is by Jordan Peterson. He says, "You can have whatever you want, but you have to know what it is." So the same is true in your candidate profile. You want to get With your candidate profile, you want to get crystal clear on exactly what you want and why that is. Now, that's not to say that we can't sometimes check some of the boxes and not all and still have a great fit. And I actually really encourage you to have maybe at least 3 different candidate profiles that can work. So you're going to have maybe one that checks all of the boxes. This is our top A player candidate, but then two other types of profiles where you're checking some of the boxes and not all, and it can still be a great fit. And it is so important to really get crystal clear on what you want and why, because when you know whatever that, because that's going to help you in creating your story. And the story that you tell about what you want and why, about your opening and your organization and your candidate profile, that is going to dictate who you attract. And if any part of your story is unclear or incorrect, or part of the important details are left out, it's easy to see how you can then potentially attract the wrong candidate. And think about it. If you are unclear on what you want, or maybe you're clear on what you want, but you don't communicate that to your recruiter when they start the search, you're going to be potentially wasting a lot of time, a lot of your time, a lot of your recruiter's time and the candidate's time. Even if you are getting resumes that are not the right candidate and you don't, or not the right resumes, and you choose not to interview those candidates, you're still distracting your focus, opening emails, reading resumes and notes from your recruiter, and then getting maybe confused on why they're sending you this candidate that's not a fit. You want to take a look back at what was your communication like? So one, get crystal clear on what you want. You never want to be vague in your candidate profile. Vague's not really the right word, but sometimes hiring managers, I think, in wanting to do the right thing, will be very open-minded and be very broad with their candidate profile. And this is actually not recommended, because then your recruiter is going to have a much more challenging time trying to find the target that you actually want. And they're going to be looking in a much bigger pool, sending you candidates that are maybe not actually what you're looking for. So you want to be very specific with what you want, and then understand that, of course, your recruiter will know if they need to go outside of the box a little bit. So in order to communicate clearly your story of your candidate profile, your company, your opening, what you're looking for, and why, you want to first get very clear on what you want. And don't be afraid to be super direct on, this is exactly what we want, because then you are much more likely to get it. Because then you are much more likely to get it. So number one, communication with your recruiter. And number two, communication with your candidates throughout the interview process. No news is never good news. Candidates, just like you want your opening to be interesting and wanted by candidates, they want to feel engaged and wanted as well. So you want to communicate with your candidates throughout the process, and you can work with your recruiter to have them provide the communication. But no news is not good news. We don't like a bunch of dead silence. You want to think about following the golden rule, very simple stuff. How would you like to be treated if you are if you're going through an interview process? You want to be engaged, you want to be updated, because then as a candidate, you know how much of your time to invest and to prioritize. So consistent communication, open, honest communication. And if you don't have time to communicate with each of your candidates, work with your recruiter and communicate with them so that they can have appropriate touch points, informative touch points with the candidates. And then the third group that you really want to have a strong communication with throughout the interview process are the other members of your leadership team, because we all have different personalities. We all have different things that we're going to be picking up on. And so maybe one member of your leadership team is better at picking up, or is going to pick up and notice certain things that maybe you don't. And that the more eyes you have on the candidate, the better, more likely you are to make the right hire. And then also, if there is a potential concern or red flag as you're going through the interview process, you can communicate that to your recruiter and to the other members of your leadership team, because then they can ask questions to help kind of tease that out and help you determine, okay, is this really a red flag or a concern? Is this making the candidate a no, or is this actually not really a concern, and let's keep moving forward? So the more eyes you have on the candidate, on the candidate with other members of your leadership team and your recruiter, and the open communication, whether you have some increasing concerns or increasing confidence, that can help you later make the right hire. All right, so that's about communication, who you want to communicate with and how you want to communicate, and why it matters. So now let's look at the process. And the last thing I just mentioned about potential red flags or concerns, this with a candidate as you go throughout the interview process, this leads into part of what it means to create the ideal process. part of what it means to create the ideal process. Sorry, the internet is going in and out. I'm going to have to figure out what's going on here because I am hooked up directly to my landline. So sorry about that if you guys are noticing on your end. I'll work on that for next time, but we'll just keep going ahead for now. Just wanted to let you know I'm aware of the interruptions and sorry about that. All right, so having the ideal interview process in place, I think you need to have at least 5 steps in the interview process. Now, I'm not going to speak to the specific steps on this video, but I will share if you are experiencing or noticing some potential concerns or challenges or red flags with a candidate, what interview step can you add into the interview process that is going to address that specific flag? So I'll also often like to say that taking time creates time. We talked about that up to 18 months of getting recovering from a bad hire. If you've got the wrong hire in place, ramping them up and then coaching them out and then getting that new, hopefully right hire and then getting them up to speed. That 18 months, that's a much longer time than maybe adding another week or two with 1 or 2 additional interview steps to the front end of the interview process to help you ensure that you do get the right hire. And so you want to pay attention to your instincts throughout the interview process. And how do you do that? By paying attention to your emotions. Interviewing, I often like to say, is or should be like dating, right? Because we can all be on our best behavior, for putting our best foot forward rather on the first date. But then, the more time you spend, the more you get to know each other. And then you can also determine how much, not only if it's a fit, but how much time do I want to invest here. So you want to also manage, and the same is true for the interview process. So with that, you also want to manage your expectations throughout. So with the process, 1, pay attention to your emotions, pay attention to your instincts. If you're getting some red flag signals, pay attention to those, and then craft a new or additional interview step that directly addresses that particular challenge. And then you can see if it is a challenge or if it's not. But then also manage your expectations throughout the process. So just like you, hiring manager, have your priorities straight, you also want candidates that have their priorities straight. So example, you wouldn't want to do a phone interview, maybe a 30-minute phone interview, and then ask that candidate to, for example, prepare a business plan and travel or a long driving distance for the second interview, because that candidate has not had enough touch points with the company, enough interaction. They've not gotten enough information to know whether or not they want to change around their schedule and prioritize your opportunity. So you want to have appropriate expectations throughout. So you want to have a process that's at least 5 steps. I'll do another video speaking to that. And you want to communicate effective communication throughout the process with your recruiter, with your candidates, and with the other members of the leadership team. And again, taking time at the front end and during the interview process is later going to save you so much time. And as we discussed, profitability potentially being lost due to bad hires. So I hope that you guys found that helpful. I'll be back next week and maybe I'll talk about the third piece that I think 15% or 14% of you guys weighed in on, the biggest challenge, which is managing the interview process. I have lots of tips on that. Definitely reach out if you have a question. You could love to hear your comments if you'd like to leave a comment. And until next time, happy hiring.